Ethan Cole pulled his horse to a stop when he heard harsh laughter echoing from the water's edge. Down below, two white men were wrestling the clothes off an Apache woman. She clung to the torn remains of her dress, slipping into the mud, her eyes blazing like a cornered flame. One of the men laughed through his teeth. "Well now, little wild snake, you think I'm scared of you?" Ethan dismounted. He did not say a word. The sharp click of the Colt's hammer cut through the air like ice. "Let her go," he said, voice low and gravelly. "Right now." They turned, froze. One look from him was enough to kill the fun. Clayton, the bigger one, cursed and jerked his chin. "Fine. I never liked jungle girls anyway." They stumbled off, leaving behind rough laughter and the sour smell of whiskey in the breeze. The girl was still trembling. Her wet hair stuck to her shoulders, her skin streaked with mud and bruises. Ethan took off his coat and gently draped it over her shoulders, careful not to look her in the eye. "There's no one else here. Let's go." She said nothing, just gave a small nod. He helped her onto the horse. The animal gave a soft whinny as if it understood it was carrying a soul far heavier than it looked. They left the lake, rode through fields of scorched grass, heading toward the cabin where the wind howled. No more words were spoken, only the creak of leather, the sound of heartbeats, and something very old, quietly beginning to mend between two people who had long stopped trusting anyone. That night, the desert wind shifted. The scent of ash and old rain slipped through every crack in the wood. Ethan Cole's cabin stood silent in the middle of the barren land, weathered and stubborn, much like the man who owned it. He opened the door and led the Apache girl inside. The firelight from the stove cast a warm glow across her face, bruised and smeared with dirt. She stood near the wall, silent. Ethan lit the stove, hung a kettle, and spoke softly, without looking at her. "Sit down, it is cold." No reply. Just the crackle of firewood and the sound of her tired breath in the dark. He grabbed an old blanket and draped it over her shoulders, then poured warm water into a dented tin cup. She reached for it, her hands shaking so badly the water spilled over her fingers. Ethan noticed the bruises on her wrists, rope marks, human marks. He turned away, said nothing. Her torn dress lay across the back of a chair. He picked it up and began stitching it, one thread at a time, quietly, as if he were sewing his own silence back together. Nia, that was her name. He only learned it when she whispered it out between soft coughs, sat watching him under the oil lamp. Her deep black eyes were both wary and puzzled. Their first meal was nothing more than thin soup and dry biscuits. She ate slowly, one bite at a time. He drank only cold coffee. The only sounds in the cabin were the wind cutting through the walls and the first drops of rain tapping on the roof. When she started to doze off, Ethan pulled the blanket up around her and lay down on the floor next to the stove. "The bed is yours," he said. "I am used to sleeping on the ground." She opened her eyes and looked at him one last time, as if wanting to say something, but only one word came out: "Thank you." Outside, the rain began to fall harder. Ethan stared up at the ceiling. Each drop that landed on the roof brought back memories of war, of screaming, of blood. He had thought he had forgotten how to care for another human being. But tonight, seeing her asleep in his old coat, something unfamiliar stirred in his chest. She curled up on the bed like a child, her hair spread out, her face no longer frozen in fear. The oil lamp burned low, casting shadows of two people, a lonely rancher and a woman torn from her pride, now sheltered under the same roof. The wind howled at the door, but inside, their breathing began to fall into rhythm. Not through words, not through trust, but through the quiet of two people who had suffered more than enough. That night, for the first time in years, Ethan slept without dreaming of war, and Nia, for the first time in many seasons, slept without hearing footsteps chasing her in the dark. Dawn came slowly after a long night of rain. The sun rose red and hazy through a thin layer of mist that covered the valley. Ethan opened the door and stepped onto the porch, his boots soaked through, breathing in the scent of wet earth, the only smell that still reminded him he was alive. Behind him, the wooden floor creaked. Nia was awake. Without a word, she picked up a broom and began sweeping the muddy leaves from the floor. She did not wait for him to ask. She expected nothing in return. As the light poured in, he saw the bruises on her shoulder had turned a deep yellow-brown. The faint marks of rope still lingered, memories etched into skin that no water could wash away. I will fix the fence, Ethan said. I am coming with you, she replied, her voice raspy but firm. The two of them stepped outside, across grass still wet with dew. Nia hitched up her skirt, picked up a hammer, and held the wooden stakes for him to drive in the nails. Each strike of the hammer echoed like a steady heartbeat, the rhythm of two broken people rebuilding themselves, one post at a time. By midday, she had lit a fire and cooked a pot of soup with beans and potatoes. Ethan sat off to the side, watching how she touched each item, gentle, careful, but not weak. The wind carried the scent of smoke and a faint trace of laughter. It was the first time he had heard her voice without a tremble. That afternoon, he handed her an old Winchester rifle. No one should live out here without knowing how to shoot, he said. Nia took it in her calloused hands, which trembled slightly from the weight of the gun. He showed her how to aim, how to hold steady, patient, like teaching a child. When the first shot rang out, the bullet hit the tin can square on the fence. She turned to him, eyes lit with a small spark, something he had not seen in her since the day they met. As night fell, they led the horses back to the stable. Ethan did not ask about her past, and she did not mention the two men at the lake. But the space between them grew smaller with each shared chore, a meal, a tied rope, a rebuilt fence. That evening, Nia sat by the window, mending the coat he had once draped over her. The glow of the oil lamp lit her face, catching the scar on her neck and turning it silver like a strand of thread. Ethan looked over and said quietly, "They might come here. Men like that, they do not give up easy." She paused, looked up, and said firmly, "I know, but I am not running anymore." He nodded. In his eyes, she was no longer the fragile woman by the lake, but someone who could stand tall in the storm. That night, the wind did not feel as cold as before. Outside, a new storm was gathering at the edge of the sky, but inside that wooden house, two strangers had begun to share the same breath. And for the first time, Ethan felt the fire in the stove burn warm, not just because of the wood, but because of something growing quietly in his chest, something he still did not dare to name. 2 weeks passed. Summer came to the west as suddenly as a dare. The grass turned golden and brittle, flies buzzed around shallow puddles, and the wind carried the scent of dry earth and rusty iron from the freshly built fences. Nia had grown stronger. Her skin was sun-kissed, her arms firm, and the light had returned to her eyes. Ethan watched her work, sometimes having to look away, not out of shame, but because he feared forgetting that she was someone he had saved, not someone he had the right to look at for too long. That afternoon, the old dog barked hoarsely outside the stable. Ethan was hauling water when he heard the sound of hoofbeats in the distance. 3 men appeared through the red dust, Clayton and the 2 who had been with him at the lake. The road dust clung to their coats, and their smiles reeked of whiskey. Clayton stopped his horse at the edge of the corral, eyeing the new fence. "Heard you got yourself a snake in the house, Cole," he said, voice gravelly like rocks scraping together. Ethan stood tall, his hand never straying far from the Winchester leaning against the fence. "Snakes know how to bite back," he replied. Their laughter cracked open the dry afternoon. One of them spat into the dirt. "That redskin woman's worth more than all your scrawny cattle, Cole. Hand her over, and maybe I forget about the lake." Ethan's grip tightened around the stock of the rifle, his eyes locked. The air was so thick, you could almost hear the sweat hit the ground. He did not shout. He simply raised the gun and squeezed the trigger slowly. The bullet hit the dirt right between Clayton's boots, sending up a puff of dust like smoke. His face went pally. His lip trembled. "You just made a big mistake, Scout," he growled. "I've made bigger ones on the battlefield," Ethan said, eyes like ice. They backed their horses up, cursing, and turned away, disappearing into the red haze, leaving behind the bitter smell of liquor and a strangled, threatening laugh. Ethan watched until they were nothing but specks on the horizon. Behind him, the cabin door creaked open. Nia stepped out, wearing a dark cotton shirt, her hair tied back, a shovel still in her dirt-covered hands. "They will come back," she said. "I know." "For me?" "No," he answered, "because they do not like to lose." She fell silent. The wind brushed a few loose strands of hair across her cheek, and something in her gaze made Ethan's chest tighten, a mix of gratitude and fear. That evening, they added locks to the stable, checked the ammunition, and led the horses deeper into cover. When the sun set, he saw her sitting by the stove, cleaning the rifle he had given her days before. The firelight cast a warm glow on her sun-darkened face, strong and calm in a way that felt new. She was no longer the woman stripped of her dignity by the lake. She was reclaiming it piece by piece, with her own hands. Thank you for being here with me. Let us know where you are listening from. And if this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to support the channel. I just wish you peace and happiness wherever you are listening from. That night, dark clouds rolled down from the mountains like a pack of hunting beasts. The air was heavy. The storm was close. Ethan checked the stable doors, his shirt clinging with sweat, his hand never leaving the Winchester. He had a feeling, the kind of gut instinct that had saved him more than once in the army, that they would come tonight. Nia was gathering firewood by the stove, the oil lamp casting a warm glow across her profile. She did not ask, but her eyes said she already knew. "How many bullets?" she asked quietly. 12 for the rifle. 6 for the Colt. How many men is that enough for? Not enough for stupidity. She gave a faint smile, the first he had seen since the day they met. Hoofbeats echoed in the distance, faint at first, then louder. Ethan looked out the window, 3 riders cutting through the storm. Clayton led the way, his face red with liquor, a burning torch in hand. "Come on out, Cole," he shouted. "I just want the woman. You keep her. I will burn your whole damn house down." Ethan stepped out onto the porch. Rain began to pour in sheets. The torchlight flickered in his eyes like twin flames. "Turn around, Clay, before I forget you were ever human." "I ain't afraid of you," he spat, and threw the torch into the stable. Flames caught the straw, smoke billowed. Ethan raised his gun, but before he could fire, the door behind him opened. Nia stepped out into the storm, soaked through, her cotton shirt clinging to her skin. Sun-darkened shoulders bare beneath torn fabric. Lightning flashed, casting her body in stark light. She stepped down the porch, her voice cutting clear through thunder and rain. "I am right here, Clay. I am not running anymore." The men froze. A woman, once their prey, now stood tall in the storm. Unafraid, unapologetics. Clayton yanked at his reins. The torch slipped from his hand and died in the mud. No one said a word. Only the rain, falling cold and heavy. Ethan stepped forward, standing beside her. His rifle was lowered, but his gaze alone made them all shiver. "She already said it," he spoke slowly. "She is not running. Now it is your turn." Clayton spat rainwater and turned his horse around. They rode off, fading into the storm, leaving behind the scent of wet smoke and the sound of pounding hearts. Ethan looked at Nia, rain sliding down her neck, mingling with the old scar. She stood still, breathing hard, eyes locked. He wanted to speak, but no words came. At last, he simply reached out and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She did not pull away. Above them, thunder cracked once more. Then silence. The rain washed away smoke, ashes, and the tracks around the stable. In the darkness, only 2 people remained, soaked through, but standing side by side. And for the first time, no one had to run. The next morning, the sky was clear, as if the storm had never happened. The wet grass shimmered like silver, droplets still clinging to the posts of the new fence. Ethan saddled the horse in silence. Nia stepped out onto the porch, her black hair damp, her sun-darkened face calm in a way that felt different. The morning light caught her eyes, no longer afraid, but steady as stone. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Town," Ethan replied, his voice rough. "To speak to the law." "You think they will listen to me?" "No. But if we do not go, they will come back." They set off. The trail was slick, rainwater still cutting long scars across the earth. When they reached the town, every eye turned to them. An Apache woman riding beside a former soldier of the West. It was a sight no one was used to. Children pointed. Women whispered behind covered mouths, and the men outside the saloon stopped drinking to stare. Sheriff Bowman, tired eyes, beer belly, stood at the station door, frowning. As they approached, "Cole, what are you bringing into town?" "The truth," Ethan said, stepping aside to reveal Nia. The small office went silent. Nia stepped forward, steady and upright, her head unbowed. She told them everything. Dry Rock Lake, the 3 men, the violence, the humiliation, the night of the storm. Her voice did not tremble, even though each word cut deep. Bowman stayed quiet for a long time, then gave a small nod. Names. Clayton Reeves, Ethan answered. And the two who rode with him. The sheriff bit his lip, scribbled the names down. I will send someone to look into it. But you should know. The law is not always fair to people like you. I do not need fairness, Nia said, her eyes dark and deep. I just need them to know I am not silent anymore. Outside, the townsfolk had begun to murmur. An old woman muttered. That redskin dares speak in the middle of town? A younger man whispered. She stands like she already won. Ethan stepped forward, standing beside her half a head taller. His cold stare silencing the crowd. She has every right to stand here, same as anyone, he said loud enough for all to hear. The sheriff looked at them both, then sighed. I do not know how this ends, Cole. But I do know this. No one ever looked this town in the eye without flinching except her. Nia gave a small nod, then turned to leave. As they rode out of town, the wind pulled loose the fabric tied in her hair, and her black hair streamed behind her in the Sunday. Ethan rode beside her, saying nothing. But in his heart, he knew today, she had not just spoken for herself. She had reclaimed the name and dignity of an entire people the world tried to forget. And he, the old soldier, saw for the first time that justice was not written on paper. It lived in the proud eyes of the woman riding beside him. That afternoon, the rain returned. Not fierce like before, just a gentle shower, scattered like someone tapping a steady rhythm on the rooftop. Nia sat on the porch, her hair loose, her hands clean of soil after planting their first row of corn. Ethan stood at a distance, watching through the soft curtain of rain. She looked like part of the land itself, strong, bare, and alive. The cabin smelled different today, the scent of wood smoke mixed with fresh cornbread. Warmth spreading through the room. On the table, the torn dress from that day was folded neatly. In its place, Nia wore the cotton shirt he had given her, sleeves rolled up, her sun-darkened skin glowing under the lamp. By the time Ethan finished the last stretch of fence, night had fallen. When he stepped inside, he paused. The sight before him left him still. Nia stood with her back to him, stirring a pot of soup. Firelight flickered across her neck where once there had been rope burns. Now, there was only smooth skin and steady breathing. Without a word, he knew. She had crossed through her fear. The stable's locked tight now, Ethan said quietly. I heard the hammer all afternoon. She smiled. You build like you are getting ready for war. Around here, peace is just the time between reloads. They both laughed. A real laugh, soft, but enough to make the house feel less empty. As the rain thickened, Nia poured him another cup of coffee. The glow from the lamp shimmered in her eyes, and he had to glance away. Clayton will not come back, she said softly. How do you know? I saw fear in his eyes. That kind of fear. Whiskey cannot drown. The room fell quiet, save for the rain and their breath. After a moment, she stepped closer, hands still holding the scent of soil, and placed one gently on his. I choose to stay, she said. Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting hers deep and dark. What does stay mean to you, Nia? It means I am not running anymore. It means I want to grow something, without being afraid someone will trample it. Ethan laid his hand over hers, rough, warm, just slightly trembling. Then stay, he said, voice low. This house has been empty for a long time. She smiled. A single tear falling onto the wooden table. He could not tell if it came from the rain or from inside her. Outside, the thunder faded. The last drops of rain fell gently onto the roof, as if erasing the last traces of the long night before. Inside the old cabin, two people, once hunted by their past, sat quietly side by side, and for the first time, the air in that place smelled not of fear, but of life. That morning, dawn spilled like a bright blanket over the land. Dew clung to the grass tips, and the sun rose behind the low hills, making the water in the well shine like glass. Ethan opened the cabin door. The early breeze carried the scent of newly sprouted corn, wood smoke, and the fresh coffee Nia had just brewed. The quiet clink of tin cups broke the stillness. You woke up later than usual, she said, and you worked like you belong here. Maybe I do. She smiled a smile without defense. The sunlight lit her sun-kissed skin, making her look like a living bronze statue, strong, warm, and full of life. All that day, they worked side by side. Ethan led the horses into the field while Nia tended the young corn, humming old Apache songs. Her melody floated in the breeze, blending with the creak of wood and the distant low of cattle, a simple song for a life just beginning. Around midday, he walked over and handed her a piece of dry bread. "You do not need saving anymore," he said. "No," she replied, "but I do need someone to live with." He looked up, and under the bright sun, their eyes met. No words needed. By late afternoon, townsfolk rode out to say that Clayton and his men were gone. No one had seen them again. An Apache woman and an ex-soldier living on the edge of Dustmere folks talked, and then they did not. The West had always been full of stories no one dared to understand, but still respected in silence. That evening, Ethan sat on the porch, cleaning his gun. Nia brought out a woven blanket and set it beside him. "I think," she said softly, "you should get rid of that. Not out of fear, but because it is no longer needed." He looked at the Colt, his fingers pausing. "Out here," he said, "a gun is the last thing that keeps a man alert. And I keep you alert in a different way," she said with a quiet smile. One that made him laugh, too. The sun sank low, golden light spilling across the field like honey. They sat side by side, silent, but silence no longer felt empty. The breeze carried the scent of old rain, wood, and something else, hope. Something Ethan thought he had lost long ago. He looked toward the distance, where the old trail led back to Dry Rock Lake. His voice was low but certain. "When I met you there, I thought I was saving someone from death. Now I know. You saved me from living forever in loneliness." Nia took his hand gently. No kiss, no vows. Just two people once broken, now choosing each other. With work, with respect, with quiet. "In this West," Ethan said, looking into the sunset, "people do not find happiness in gold, but in the hand that still reaches out when the storm comes." The cabin glowed with light. Rain was falling somewhere out on the highway again. But for them, every old footprint had been washed clean. And for the first time, Dustmere had a real home. My friend, real love does not change a person in an instant. It slows them down, helps them understand more, and gives them the courage to live kindly, even when the world remains cruel. In a land of dust and storms, two hearts willing to stay silent for each other, that is already a miracle. Thank you for still being here. I truly wish that wherever you are safe and at peace. I love all of you, my dear audience. Let me know how you feel about this story. Drop a comment below. Type the number 8 if this story touched your heart. And do not forget to subscribe, so you do not miss the next dramatic tale from the wild, wild West.